The Eternal Whispers of Georgia, a journey through hidden natural wonders. Nestled at the crossroads of ancient worlds, Georgia emerges as a jewel in the Caucasus, a land where the earth's raw poetry unfolds in breathtaking splendor. This enchanting nation, straddling the divide between Europe and Asia, lies like a bridge of emerald and stone, its contours shaped by the mighty Greater Caucasus Mountains to the north and the undulating Lesser Caucasus to the south. From the shimmering shores of the Black Sea in the west to the arid steppes edging the Caspian influences in the east, Georgia's landscape is a symphony of contrasts, where snow-capped peaks kiss the clouds and verdant valleys cradle secrets older than time itself. Bordered by the vast Russian Federation to the north, the historic realms of Turkey and Armenia to the south, the vibrant Azerbaijan to the southeast, and the boundless Black Sea to the west, Georgia stands as a guardian of diverse ecosystems, its 69,700 square kilometers, a realm roughly the size of the Republic of Ireland or the island of Sri Lanka, harboring a tapestry of untouched wilderness that defies the modern world's haste. With a population of approximately 3.7 million souls, scattered like wildflowers across its hills and hollows, this is a country where humanity treads lightly, allowing nature's voice to dominate the chorus. In Georgia, the wonders are not the clamor of capitals but the silent hymns of the wild, glaciers that gleam like frozen dreams, canyons carved by rivers of liquid sapphire, and mountains that rise as cathedrals of stone, inviting the wanderer to lose themselves in the embrace of the eternal. Here, the air is perfumed with pine and wild thyme, the winds carry echoes of ancient glaciers, and every vista is a verse in nature's unending epic. Join us as we traverse these hidden realms, where the Caucasus breathes life into valleys of mist and meadows of gold, revealing the soul-stirring beauty that makes Georgia a paradise for the heart and the horizon. The Svaneti Mountains, guardians of the frozen sky. In the remote northwest of Georgia, the Svaneti Mountains ascend like colossal sentinels forged from the dreams of giants, their jagged silhouettes etched against a canvas of perpetual blue. These peaks, part of the Greater Caucasus chain, soar to over 5,000 meters, where snow eternal clings to their flanks like a lover's whisper, and valleys below bloom in defiant emerald defiance of the cold. Mist veils the lower slopes in the early morn, unveiling rivers that tumble from glacial heights in frothy cascades, their waters singing hymns to the stone they have sculpted over millennia. Here, alpine meadows unfurl like nature's embroidered cloaks, dotted with edelweiss and alpine roses that nod in the crisp breeze, a fragile beauty thriving in the shadow of immensity. The air, thin and crystalline, carries the faint tang of ice and earth, invigorating the lungs as one ascends paths trodden by ancient shepherds, where the only companions are the soaring eagles and the distant rumble of avalanches. As the sun dips low, golden light bathes the ridges in a glow that transforms rock into liquid fire, casting long shadows that dance across flower-strewn plateaus, evoking a sense of timeless isolation where the soul finds communion with the wild. These mountains are not mere elevations but living poems, their every crevice a stanza of resilience, inviting the seeker to trace the veins of quartz and granite that pulse with the heartbeat of the land. In Svaneti, the wind sculpts ice into ethereal spires, and fog weaves tapestries around hidden tarns, where reflections of the stars pool like spilled mercury under the midnight vault. One cannot help but pause at the edge of a sheer drop, where the world falls away into a sea of undulating green, feeling the profound humility of standing before nature's unyielding masterpiece. The Svaneti Mountains cradle secrets in their folds, clefts where rare orchids bloom unseen, and streams that birth life in the barren heights, reminding us that true wonder lies in the untamed, the uncharted, the eternal dance of earth and sky. Bukmaro village, the cloud-kissed haven. High in the Meskheti range, Bukmaro village perches like a forgotten verse in the poetry of the mountains, at 1,950 meters where the forest meets the firmament in a tender embrace. Spruce groves encircle this alpine retreat, their dark needles whispering secrets to the wind, while meadows of wild sorrel and clover stretch out like nature's verdant quilt under the vast dome above. In the hush of dawn, mist rises from the unseen Black Sea far below, blanketing the hills in a soft, ethereal haze that blurs the line between earth and dream, turning ordinary paths into trails of enchantment. The air here is an elixir of pine resin and mountain dew, cool against the skin, carrying the faint melody of distant cowbells from grazing herds that dot the slopes like living punctuation. As daylight strengthens, sunlight filters through the canopy, gilding the leaves in hues of amber and jade, illuminating hidden glades where butterflies flit among the heather, their wings a fleeting iridescence in the green cathedral. Bukmaro's beauty unfolds in layers, rolling ridges that cascade toward the horizon, punctuated by outcrops of weathered basalt that stand as ancient altars to the sun, their surfaces etched by rains that have fallen since the world's youth. In summer, the village awakens to a symphony of birdsong, larks spiraling skyward from nests woven in the grass, while evenings bring a chorus of crickets under a tapestry of stars that seem close enough to touch. Winters transform this haven into a realm of purity, snow draping the evergreens in mantles of white, creating a silent world where cross-country trails meander through powder drifts, and the horizon glows with the promise of auroral lights dancing on the edge of night. One wanders these heights with a sense of suspended time, where the curve of the earth reveals itself in panoramic sweeps, from the distant shimmer of coastal waves to the intimate curve of a dew-kissed fern. Bukmaro is nature's quiet ode to serenity, a place where the soul sheds its burdens like autumn leaves, finding renewal in the gentle rhythm of breath and breeze. Anacopia Fortress echoes amid the verdant cliffs. Perched on the Abkhazian cliffs overlooking the Black Sea, Anacopia Fortress nestles into a cradle of subtropical wildness, where sheer walls of limestone plunge into forests of laurel and boxwood that cling tenaciously to the rock. This ancient sentinel overlooks gorges carved by the Anacopia River, its waters a ribbon of turquoise weaving through canyons dense with rhododendron blooms that explode in pink and white cascades come spring. The air hums with the salt-kissed breath of the sea below, mingling with the earthy perfume of moss-covered stones and the faint, sweet nectar of wild honey from bees that drone among the blossoms. Trails wind upward through groves of ancient oaks, their gnarled branches arching like the arms of forgotten gods, framing vistas where the mountains meet the waves in a harmonious collision of green and blue. At the fortress's edge, the land drops away into abyssal depths, revealing hidden coves where the sea laps at pebble beaches fringed by tamarisk trees, their feathery leaves shivering in the coastal gusts. Dawn here paints the cliffs in strokes of rose and gold, awakening the understory to a chorus of thrushes whose songs echo off the stone, while twilight drapes the scene in indigo shadows, stars emerging like fireflies from the velvet sky. The surrounding wilds are a labyrinth of micro-worlds, sun-dappled clearings carpeted in cyclamen, and shaded nooks where ferns unfurl like scrolls of emerald script, testifying to the resilience of life in this rugged embrace. Anacopia's natural throne is a symphony of senses, where the roar of distant surf underscores the rustle of leaves, and the eye feasts on layers of texture, the smooth curve of river-worn pebbles, the fractured poetry of basalt columns rising from the gorge. In this forgotten corner, nature reclaims the ruins with tender vines and blooming creepers, weaving a tapestry that speaks of cycles unbroken, where the fortress stands not as conqueror but as humble witness to the land's enduring grace. Telavi, whispers of the Olizoni Valley. Tucked in the eastern embrace of the Karhati region, Telavi overlooks the Olizoni Valley, a vast basin where the earth unfurls in undulating waves of vineyard green and golden steppe, cradled by the looming Caucasus to the north. Rivers here meander like silver veins through fertile plains, their banks lined with poplars that sway in rhythmic unison, casting dappled shade on meadows alive with the hum of bees foraging among thyme and sage. The valley's air is warm and heady, infused with the loamy scent of sun-baked soil and the faint, resinous whisper of pine from the flanking hills, where wild boar roam shadowed thickets at dusk. As the sun climbs, light floods the landscape in a golden haze, illuminating escarpments of tough stone that glow like embers, their layered strata telling tales of volcanic births long past. Hidden springs bubble from the earth, forming pools ringed by reeds where dragonflies skim the surface like jeweled skimmers, their iridescent wings catching the prism of midday. Evenings bring a cooling zephyr from the mountains, stirring the grasses into a sea of silver tips that ripple under the moon's pale gaze, while fireflies pulse like wandering stars in the gathering dark. The Olizoni's beauty lies in its subtle grandeur, gentle swells of hillocks carpeted in wild iris, and distant ridges fading into misty veils that hint at realms beyond. One traces forgotten paths through olive groves, where ancient trees twist skyward with bark like weathered parchment, their fruit a promise of earth's quiet abundance. Tel Aviv's surrounds are a pastoral elegy, where the horizon curves in soft invitation, and the land's pulse syncs with the wanderer's own, evoking a profound sense of belonging to something vast and verdant. Mestia, gateway to the alpine solitude. In the bosom of Upper Svaneti, Mestia emerges as a verdant prelude to the mountain's wild heart, where conifer forests cloak the hills in shades of deepest green, their needles a rustling canopy pierced by shafts of sunlight. Streams born from higher melts cascade through the town's fringes, foaming over mossy boulders in a perpetual lullaby, their mist rising to nourish orchids that cling to damp cliffs like delicate lanterns. The air is a crisp tonic, laced with the sharp bite of fir and the subtle sweetness of blooming larch, invigorating the senses as paths climb toward overlooks where the valley spreads like a rumpled quilt of pasture and peak. Meadows here are nature's fresco, painted with strokes of buttercup yellow and violet gentian, grazed by hardy sheep whose wool catches the wind like fleeting clouds. As afternoon wanes, shadows lengthen across the slopes, carving the landscape into a chiaroscuro of light and dark, where distant glaciers gleam like veins of quartz under the paling sky. Nightfall unveils a celestial dome unmarred by city glow, constellations wheeling above the silhouette of towers that pierce the starry void, their stone forms softened by moonlight on lingering snow. Mestia's wild environs invite deeper communion, trails that snake through birch groves to hidden tarns, where water mirrors the encircling ridges in perfect stillness, broken only by the plop of a frog or the cry of a nightjar. This is a place of layered serenity, where the earth's textures entwine, the velvet of sphagnum moss underfoot, the grit of scree on steeper ascents, and the silken flow of air that carries pollen like golden dust. In Mestia, nature's narrative is one of gentle revelation, unfolding petal by petal to reveal the profound beauty of solitude amid the sublime. Alaverdi Monastery, cloaked in verdant veils. Nestled in the Tusheti wilds, Alaverdi Monastery perches on a forested knoll where birch and hazel form a living arcade, their leaves a shimmering mosaic that filters sunlight into pools of liquid gold on the forest floor. The surrounding hills roll like the folds of a giant's robe, carpeted in alpine turf where edelweiss stars gleam amid the grass, and streams chuckle through gullies lined with ferns that arch like green cathedral vaults. The air resonates with the pure essence of mountain spring, cool and laced with the earthy musk of damp soil and blooming heather, a balm that soothes the spirit as one ascends the winding path. Glades open unexpectedly, ringed by wild rose thickets heavy with dew-kissed petals, their thorns a reminder of beauty's fierce protection, while butterflies, cabbage whites and admirals, flutter in lazy spirals, alighting on thistles that nod in the breeze. As the day progresses, light shifts across the canopy, turning the greens to jade and emerald, illuminating mossy outcrops where lichens paint intricate mandalas on the bark of ancient trunks. Dusk descends in a hush, the valley filling with the twilight chorus of owls and the rustle of voles in the undergrowth, as fireflies ignite the gloom like earthbound stars. Alaverdi's natural halo is a tapestry of intimacy, hidden copses where violets carpet the ground in spring, and ridges that offer sweeping views of the Pirikita Range, its peaks a jagged silhouette against the fading rose of sunset. One lingers in these woods, tracing the vein-like roots that knit the soil, feeling the land's quiet vitality pulse beneath, a sacred rhythm that binds stone, leaf, and sky in harmonious eternity. Umshketa, threads of riverine reverie. Along the banks of the Mkvari River near Umshketa, the landscape weaves a serene riverscape where willows dip their fronds into waters that flow like molten silver under the sun's caress. Floodplains stretch in lazy loops, fringed by alder groves whose roots drink deeply from the current, creating shaded nooks where otters play in the eddies, their sleek forms slicing the surface with joyful abandon. The air is soft and river-scented, carrying the fresh tang of wet pebbles and the subtle bloom of waterside irises that line the shores in purple sentinels. Cliffs of ochre sandstone rise gently from the water, their faces etched by seasonal floods into abstract sculptures, while opposite banks bloom with wild garlic and sorrel, their leaves a vibrant counterpoint to the river's cool blue. Midday brings a play of light on the waves, sparkling like scattered diamonds, as kingfishers dart from perches with flashes of turquoise wing, vanishing into the reeds that sway like feathered dancers. Evenings cool the valley into a mist-wreathed dream, where the river's murmur lulls the senses, and the horizon blushes with alpenglow reflected in the tranquil flow. Amshketa's riverine wonders extend to hidden meanders, where gravel bars emerge like natural islands, colonized by bindweed and forget-me-nots that trail into the shallows, creating a mosaic of blue and white. One follows the water's curve, inhaling the loamy breath of the floodplain, where the earth's fertility manifests in every verdant shoot and rippling reflection, a timeless ode to the gentle power of flow and renewal. Shailuri Castle, overlooks of canyon splendor. From the heights above Shailuri Castle, the Tusheti Plateau unfolds in a dramatic sweep of canyons and plateaus, where the Kura's tributary has gouged deep gashes into the earth, revealing layers of sedimentary rock like the pages of a geologic tome. These gorges, cloaked in scrub oak and wild pistachio, drop precipitously to riverbeds where waters rush in frothy urgency over boulders, smoothed by eons, their spray nourishing ferns that cascade down the walls in verdant waterfalls of leaf. The air up here is dry and spiced with the resin of juniper bushes that dot the rims, their berries a burst of blue against the tawny stone, while thermals lift hawks in lazy circles, their cries echoing across the void. Sunlight rakes the canyon floors at dawn, turning the river to a thread of fire and igniting the wildflowers, thistles and asters, that cling to ledges, defying gravity with petals of defiant color. As shadows lengthen, the gorges become realms of mystery, purple depths where the wind moans through clefts, carrying the faint chill of underground springs that bubble to the surface in hidden oases. Shailuri's vantage reveals nature's sculptural genius, arches of eroded tuff spanning dry washes, and basins where seasonal rains pool into mirrors reflecting the infinite sky. Wandering these rims, one feels the pulse of the plateau, the crackle of dry grass underfoot, the whisper of wind through thornbrush, and the distant roar that speaks of the river's unyielding carve. This is a landscape of stark poetry, where the castle's perch becomes a throne for contemplating the earth's patient artistry, vast and visceral. Vardzia, labyrinth of the sun-baked caves. In the southern heartland, Vardzia's cave complex burrows into the Svaneti Mountains like the burrows of earthbound stars, where tough cliffs glow ochre under the relentless sun, their faces pocked with chambers that echo the canyon's vast acoustics. The Mtvari River snakes below, a lifeline of emerald through arid badlands, its banks fringed by tamarisk that sways in the hot wind, dropping feathery seeds like whispers to the dust. The air shimmers with heat, scented by sage and the faint, mineral tang of sun-warmed stone, while shadows pool in the cave mouths, offering respite where swallows nest in mud-daubed eaves, their chirps a lively counterpoint to the silence. As light shifts, the cliffs transform, morning gilds the facades in honeyed tones, revealing veins of quartz that sparkle like embedded jewels, and noon etches sharp contrasts that accentuate the labyrinth's intricate honeycomb. Dusk softens the edges, painting the river in indigo strokes as bats emerge in swirling clouds, silhouetted against the cooling sky streaked with saffron. Vardzia's natural theatre extends to the surrounding badlands, where wind-sculpted hoodoos rise like fantastical spires, and hidden wadis bloom briefly after rains with poppies that flame against the parched earth. One explores the clefts, fingers tracing the cool interior stone, inhaling the dry, ancient breath of the mountain's core, where the river's distant song underscores the profound intimacy of cave and canyon. Here, nature's architecture rivals any handiwork, a testament to erosion's elegant hand, where light and shadow play eternal games in the heart of stone. Katsky Pillar, the solitary spire of faith. Rising stark from the Imereti plains, the Katsky Pillar thrusts 40 meters skyward like a finger of divine inquiry, a solitary limestone monolith wreathed in the golden haze of steppe grasses that undulate in endless waves around its base. This improbable tower, capped by a tiny chapel, stands amid fields of wild wheat and barley, where the wind sows seeds of dandelion fluff that drift like nomadic clouds, alighting on the pillar's sheer flanks. The air is warm and grass-scented, laced with the sweet decay of sun-bleached thistle and the faint ozone of approaching storms that brew over the distant Colchian lows. At sunrise, the spire catches the first rays, glowing like a beacon amid the flat expanse, its shadow stretching long across furrows where hares dart through the cover of milkweed. Midday heat mirages dance at its foot, blurring the line between earth and ether, while evenings bring a cooling breeze that rustles the surrounding savanna, turning the grasses to silver under the moon's gaze. Katsky's isolation amplifies nature's subtleties, the crackle of locusts in the heat, the sudden bloom of crocuses after winter's thaw, and the rare visitation of eagles that perch on its summit, surveying the boundless plain. Circling the base, one marvels at the pillar's unyielding form, etched by rains into subtle flutings, a vertical poem amid the horizontal poetry of the steppe, where the land's flat vastness contrasts the spire's defiant rise, evoking a sense of cosmic balance in the quiet drama of stone and sky. Sinagi, balcony over the Kakhetian expanse. From Sinagi's hilltop perch, the Kakhetian basin reveals itself as a boundless amphitheater of rolling hills and vine-clad slopes, where the Olizoni River traces a serpentine path through ochre soils, reflecting the vault of heaven in its glassy bends. Terraced ridges fold into one another like the pleats of an infinite skirt, cloaked in the deep green of fig and mulberry groves that heavy the air with their leafy exhalations, mingled with the dusty perfume of sun-ripened earth. Breezes from the Caucasus carry the chill of snowmelt, stirring the canopies into a rustling sea, while below, dry riverbeds scar the valley floor like ancient runes, their gravel beds alive with the scuttle of lizards basking in the warmth. Dawn bathes the scene in peach and lavender, awakening the wild olives that dot the hillsides, their twisted trunks gnarled testaments to centuries of wind and rain, dropping silver leaves that carpet the paths in shimmering drifts. As the sun arcs high, light floods the basin, turning the distant peaks to a hazy azure mirage, and illuminating pockets of wild lavender that release bursts of purple fragrance with every passing step. Twilight descends in a symphony of color, the sky ablaze with crimson as the valley pools shadows, and the river becomes a dark ribbon threading the glowing land. Sinagi's overlook is a canvas of layered beauty, swales where asphodel spikes thrust upward like spears of light, and escarpments where erosion has crafted natural balconies for contemplating the infinite. In this elevated reverie, nature's palette unfolds without end, a gentle reminder of the land's quiet, undulating grace. Akaltsikhe Castle, sentinel over the Java-Kheti wilds. Overlooking the verdant Meskheti range near Akaltsikhe Castle, the landscape descends into a mosaic of meadows and gorges, where the Potskovi River carves sinuous paths through basalt plateaus, its waters foaming white against obsidian rocks that gleam like polished onyx in the sun. Pine forests crown the higher slopes, their trunks straight as arrows piercing the sky, while lower valleys bloom with meadows of crimson clover and yellow butterweed, swaying in unison to the mountain zephyrs that sweep down from the highlands. The air is invigorating, redolent of conifer sap and the fresh-cut scent of wild mint crushed underfoot, a sensory prelude to the wildflower explosions that paint the hills in spring's riotous hues. Sunbeams slant through the trees at morn, dappling the riverbanks with patterns of light that dance like fireflies on the current, awakening trout that leap in silver arcs from the depths. Afternoon brings thermals that lift kites of buzzards circling the castle's heights, their wings casting fleeting eclipses over glades where deer graze in dappled shade, antlers branching like the river's own tributaries. As day fades, the gorges fill with violet mist, the river's song softening to a murmur under the emerging stars that prick the deepening blue. The Javaketi wilds around the castle harbor hidden gems, clefts where hot springs steam from the earth, ringed by ferns that thrive in the mineral warmth, and ridges that offer vistas of the lesser Caucasus folding into infinity. Here, nature's fortitude mirrors the stone keep, a realm where water, wood, and wind conspire in eternal, elemental harmony. Caucasus Mountains, the spine of eternal majesty. The Greater Caucasus Mountains form Georgia's northern backbone, a colossal range where peaks like sentinels of myth thrust upward in tiers of granite and schist, their summits eternally wreathed in cirrus veils that trail like bridal trains across the firmament. Glaciers vein these heights, rivers of ice that carve into crevasses of breathtaking depth, their surfaces cracked into azure labyrinths where the sun's reflection blinds like diamonds, scattered on frozen silk. Valleys plunge between the ridges, cradling old-growth forests of beech and oak whose canopies form emerald tunnels, alive with the drip of dew and the trill of warblers hidden in the foliage. The air thins to a rarefied purity, tasting of snow and stone, with winds that sculpt snow cornices into fantastical overhangs, whispering through passes where wild goats balance on impossible ledges. Dawn gilds the eastern faces in alpenglow, turning ice to rose quartz and awakening avalanches that rumble like distant thunder, reshaping the slopes in cascades of powder. Midday exposes the range's textural symphony, scree fields of shattered slate, alpine pastures stitched with gentians, and tarns that mirror the chaos above in serene inversion. Twilight cloaks the mountains in purpled majesty, shadows pooling in cirques as the last light ignites the snowfields in crimson fire, a spectacle that humbles the beholder to silence. The Caucasus harbors realms within realms, basalt columns marching like petrified warriors, karst caves exhaling cool breaths of subterranean mystery, and hot springs bubbling from fault lines, their steam mingling with the scent of sulfur and wild rose. Traversing these heights, one feels the Earth's tectonic pulse, the slow grind of plates that birthed this grandeur, a living epic where every vista evokes the sublime terror and tender beauty of untamed creation. Uplist Seek, caves amid the gory plateau. Carved into the sun-scorched bluffs above the Mkvari near Uplist Seek, the gory plateau stretches as a tableland of loess and limestone, where wind has sculpted the earth into fluted columns and natural amphitheaters ringed by scrub juniper that clings with gnarled tenacity. The river below winds through poplar groves, its banks a fringe of willow and reed that sways in the current's lazy pull, creating shaded pools where minnows dart like silver needles in the shallows. The air is dry and herb-infused, carrying the pungent bite of artemisia, and the faint, baked earth aroma of sun-warmed tuff, a palette that shifts with the light to reveal veins of fossilized shell in the rock faces. Morning reveals the plateau's subtle contours, gentle swells dotted with wild tulips that unfurl petals of flame against the beige, and dry wadis where seasonal torrents have etched miniature canyons, their walls adorned with lichens in scales of ochre and grey. As heat builds, mirages quiver over the flats, blurring the horizon where the river meets distant hills, while lizards sun themselves on boulders, their scales flashing emerald in the glare. Dusk cools the land into relief, shadows carving the bluffs into dramatic relief as the Mkvari turns to molten lead under the sunset's forge. Uplist Seek surrounds whisper of arid poetry, sandstone arches spanning forgotten gullies, and basins where rain gathers into ephemeral lakes ringed by salt-loving grasses that shimmer like hoarfrost. Exploring the plateau, fingers graze the porous stone, inhaling the ancient dust that carries echoes of wind-sculpted time, a landscape where the cave city's perch becomes a portal to the Earth's exposed diary, vast and vulnerably beautiful. Inguri Dam, the tamed torrent of Svaneti. Straddling the Inguri River in the Svaneti wilds, the dam harnesses a force of nature born from glacial melts, where the waters gather from high cirques in a confluence of foaming fury, rushing through gorges lined with alder that dip their roots into the spray-kissed flow. The reservoir above mirrors the encircling peaks, a vast sapphire eye reflecting spruce-clad slopes and the jagged teeth of basalt that frame the valley like a natural coliseum. The air pulses with the river's vigor, cool mists rising from the spillway, scented by wet stone and the sharp tang of hydroelectric hum, while rainbows arc perpetually in the vapor where sunlight pierces the cascade. Dawn tints the water to pearl, awakening the reservoir's shores to a fringe of wild mint and loose strife that blooms in defiant color against the concrete's gray, birds skimming the surface in V formations that etch fleeting wakes. Midday amplifies the roar, the dam a thunderous heartbeat amid the mountain's silence, as trout leap in the tail race, scales glinting like coins tossed to the depths. Twilight hushes the tumult, the reservoir becoming a dark mirror to the stars, its edges softened by evening fog that drifts like spectral veils over submerged forests, ghostly trunks rising from the flood like the ribs of drowned titans. The Inguri's domain extends to hidden coves where the water laps at pebble beaches fringed by birch, and upstream trails that climb to alpine bogs carpeted in sphagnum that squelches underfoot, releasing peat's earthy perfume. Here, human artifice bows to nature's scale, the dam a mere frame for the river's eternal song, a place where power and peace entwine in the wild pulse of water and stone. Tusheti National Park, realm of the untrodden peaks. Deep in the Pirikita Mountains of Tusheti National Park, alpine meadows sweep upward in emerald billows, broken only by the stark silhouettes of glacial moraines that scar the slopes like the tracks of ancient behemoths. Rivers originate here in crystal threads from snowfields that linger year-round, tumbling into pebbled beds where they sing over quartzite slabs, their spray nurturing mosses that glow neon green in shaded clefts. The air is a mountain nectar, rarefied and laced with the alpine bouquet of edelweiss and saxifrage, winds keening through passes where golden eagles ride thermals, their shadows rippling across flower-strewn pastures. Sunrise ignites the high pastures, turning dew to prisms on blades of fescue, while yaks graze in herds that move like slow clouds, bells tinkling faintly in the vast quiet. Afternoon brings cloud shadows that chase across the land, pooling in cirques where tarns of ink, blue depth reflect the encircling spires, undisturbed save for the occasional ripple from a feeding char. Dusk paints the park in amethyst, the meadows exhaling the day's warmth as nightjars chirr from rocky outcrops, stars wheeling overhead in a dome unpolluted by light. Tusheti's wild heart harbors labyrinthine gorges where walls of conglomerate rise sheer, veined with wild ivy that climbs like verdant ladders, and hidden plateaus where rare argali balance on ledges, horns curling like question marks against the sky. Traversing these heights, one sinks into the boggy give of cotton grass, inhales the ozone of thunderheads gathering on the rim, feeling the land's raw, unyielding vitality, a sanctuary where nature's wildness reigns supreme, untamed and utterly profound. Chaladi Glacier, frozen symphony of Svaneti. Descending from the Chaladi Cirque in Svanteti's embrace, the Chaladi Glacier flows like a river of captured winter, its crevassed surface a fractured mosaic of blue ice that cracks with the subtle shift of millennia, veined by melt streams that trickle like tears of sapphire. Flanked by moraines of pulverized granite, the glacier's tongue laps at meadows where hardy alpines, solgenella and gentians, thrive in the fringe of cold, their petals unfurling like flags of resilience against the chill. The air bites with glacial breath, crisp and laced with the mineral sharpness of ancient snow, winds moaning through seracs that tower like translucent cathedrals, their facets refracting sunlight into rainbows that arc across the ice. Dawn softens the edges, pink light suffusing the ice to rose quartz, awakening the trickle of rills that carve sinuous paths down the snout, pooling into lagoons where reflections double the surrounding peaks in illusory depth. Midday exposes the glacier's innards, mills of azure in the depths of fissures, where the sun's probe reveals layers of compressed time, and avalanches of serac tumble in muffled roars, reshaping the flow with powdery grace. Twilight cloaks the scene in silver, the ice glowing phosphorescent under the moon, shadows pooling in bergskrans like inky abysses that swallow the light. Chaladi's realm extends to the lateral valleys, where side glaciers carve into hanging valleys, birthing waterfalls that plume into mist-shrouded vales, and terminal moraines carpeted in dwarf willow that rustles like papery whispers. Approaching the ice's edge, one hears the creak of expansion, feels the cold radiate like a living presence, a frozen poem where water's wild dance pauses in crystalline stasis, evoking awe at nature's patient, ponderous beauty. An Anuri fortress complex, lakeside echoes of the Aragvi. Overlooking the Zinvali reservoir from Anuri's heights, the Aragvi River's ancient bed now forms a placid lake encircled by pine-forested hills, where the water's surface shimmers like beaten copper under the caress of morning zephyrs. Submerged valleys create fjord-like inlets fringed by steep bluffs of schist that plunge directly into the depths, their faces draped in ivy and wild clematis that blooms in starry profusion come summer. The air is lake-fresh, infused with the lonely scent of wet earth and the resinous sigh of conifers that march down to the shore, their reflections doubling in the still mirror below. Dawn parts the mist in veils of pearl, revealing herons stalking the shallows with deliberate grace, their legs threading the water lilies that float like pale platters on the surface. Midday brings sparkle to the waves, wind-ruffled patterns chasing across the reservoir as kayaks slice silent paths, disturbing schools of roach that flicker like silver confetti. Dusk hushes the waters to obsidian, the surrounding hills silhouetted against a sky aflame, fireflies igniting the gloaming along reed-fringed coves where frogs chorus in bass counterpoint. Anuri's lakeside wilds harbor intimate wonders, hidden beaches of fine gravel where dragonflies hover over tide pools, and upstream gorges where the Aragvi foams anew over mossy ledges, birthing rainbows in the spray. From the complex's ramparts, one gazes upon this aqueous realm, inhaling the cool exhalation of the water, feeling the subtle sway of earth and lake in rhythmic unity, a tranquil interlude where nature's fluidity tempers the stone's stern gaze. Kahati, the verdant cradle of eastern vales. Kahati's eastern expanse is a symphony of undulant hills and broad vales, where the Olizoni and Yori rivers weave through alluvial plains carpeted in wild grasses that ripple like ocean swells under the vast Caucasian sky. Oak savannas punctuate the landscape, their spreading canopies shading glades of asphodel and hyacinth that perfume the air with spring's heady elixir, mingled with the dry, sun-toasted whisper of steppe sage. Breezes from the high passes carry a chill edge, stirring dust devils that spiral across the flats, depositing loess in drifts that nourish the thorny scrub of barberry and hawthorn. Sunrise floods the vales with amber, gilding the riverbanks where poplars stand tall as lances, their leaves clatter in the freshening wind, while dew clings to spiderwebs like jeweled filigree. Afternoon heat bakes the earth to a golden crust, mirages dancing over dry salt pans that gleam like interior seas, birds of prey wheeling on thermals above the thermal updrafts. Twilight cools the land into lavender haze, the rivers turning to threads of quicksilver as bats flit from cliffside roosts, silhouetted against the afterglow. Kahati's hidden folds reveal karst sinkholes ringed by wild rose, their depths lush with ferns fed by unseen aquifers, and escarpments where erosion crafts natural bridges, spanning seasonal streams. Wandering these vales, one brushes against blooming Judas trees, their magenta cascades a burst of color in the green monotony, sensing the region's quiet fertility, a land where the east's arid breath meets the mountain's moist kiss in harmonious, horizon-spanning beauty. Mount Kazbek, the snow-crowned titan. Mount Kazbek rears from the Trousseau Valley like a deity hewn from ice and fire, its 5,047-meter summit a perpetual crown of glaciers that spill in radiant tongues down flanks of dark basalt, veined by streams of melt that sparkle like quicksilver veins. The surrounding alpine zone is a realm of stark splendor, scree slopes of shattered andesite carpeted in sparse lichen that glows chartreuse after rains, while higher up, snowfields stretch unbroken to the horizon, broken only by the black scars of nunataks piercing the white. The air at base is pine-scented from the valley forests, thinning to glacial purity as one ascends, winds howling through cols where prayer flags would flutter if placed, carrying the faint, ozone bite of thunderheads. Dawn bathes the peak in solar rose, the ice fields igniting in prismatic fire as crevasses yawn like azure mouths, swallowing the light. Midday exposes the mountain's architecture, cornices overhanging like frozen waves, ready to carve in thunderous displays that echo across the valley, reshaping the landscape in powdery veils. Dusk crowns Kazbek in imperial purple, the snow glowing within a luminescence as stars prick the velvet dome, the silence profound save for the creak of cooling rock. Kazbek's domain includes hanging valleys where side glaciers birth waterfalls that plume into mist, and thermal springs at the foot that steam amid meadows of edelweiss, their warmth a contrast to the height's chill. Climbing its approaches, one treads the give of neve, inhales the crisp exhalation of eternal winter, feeling the Titan's presence as a palpable force, a pinnacle where Earth's core meets the cosmos in sublime, unapproachable grace. New Atos, subtropical shores of the Colchian Wild. Along the Black Sea's eastern rim in New Atos, subtropical forests cascade to the water's edge, where laurel and boxwood form impenetrable thickets alive with the hum of cicadas and the flash of bee-eaters darting through the dappled light. The sea here laps at pebble strands fringed by figs whose leaves quiver in the salt breeze, dropping fruit that bursts with honey juice onto the tideline, mingling with the iodine tang of kelp washed ashore by nocturnal tides. Inland, gorges of the Sitska River cut through karst plateaus, their walls draped in maidenhair ferns that cascade like green waterfalls, fed by springs that bubble cold and clear from limestone fissures. The air is humid and verdant, saturated with the bloom of oleander and the resinous undertone of pine groves that climb the slopes, their needles a rustling roof pierced by sunbeams that speckle the forest floor. Morning mist rises from the sea, veiling the coves in cotton wool as dolphins arc through the waves offshore, their breaths puffs of vapor in the dawn calm. Afternoon sun scorches the beaches to white heat, the water a turquoise temptation where coral gardens teem unseen below, alive with anemones waving like undersea flames. Twilight brings bioluminescent glow to the shallows, plankton sparking like fallen stars as the forest exhales the day's warmth in firefly dances. New Atos Wilds harbor sea caves where waves echo in cavernous roars, their mouths framed by wild ivy, and coastal cliffs honeycombed with swallow nests that plaster the faces in mud arabesques. Strolling these shores, one tastes the salt on the wind, feels the sand's grit yield to wave, immersed in the Colchian mythos where sea and jungle entwine in exotic, eternal embrace. Kura River, the lifeline of liquid song. The Kura River, Georgia's arterial vein, meanders from Armenian highlands through eastern vales, its waters a ceaseless murmur over beds of rounded basalt, flanked by riparian corridors of willow and ash that arch overhead like natural arbors heavy with birdsong. In its middle reaches, the river broadens into oxbows where sandbars emerge like half-submerged islands, colonized by reed mazes that sway in the current, harboring herons that stalk the shallows with egret grace. The air along its banks is a blend of riverine freshness and meadow bloom, the cool mist of riffles carrying pollen from adjacent fields of wild dill and yarrow that nod in yellow profusion. Dawn gilds the surface to molten gold, fish rising in concentric rings that ripple toward distant bends, while kingfishers perch on overhanging boughs, plunging in azure blurs to seize their prey. Midday sun turns the Kura to a blinding mirror, heat mirages dancing above the flow as otters tumble in playful eddies, their sleek forms weaving through lily pads that float like green medallions. Dusk deepens the water to indigo ink, reflections of riverside poplars stretching long as the sky fades to bruised violet, frogs chorusing from mudflats in a primal nocturne. The Kura's wanderings reveal gorge sections where it foams through basalt narrows, spray-nourishing hanging gardens of moss and lichen that drape the walls like velvet curtains, and floodplain forests where wild boar root in the loamy understory, tusks turning soil like living plows. Following its course, one hears the perpetual hush of water on stone, feels the damp kiss of mist on skin, a lifeline where the land's thirst is quenched in flowing, forgiving beauty. Svan Tower, silhouettes in the mountain vale. Svaneti's upland meadows, Svan towers rise like fingers of forgotten lore from the earth, their stone base is rooted in turf that blooms with crocus in spring's thaw, encircled by stone walls that blend seamlessly with the granite outcrops of the hills. These medieval sentinels overlook valleys where the Inguri's tributaries thread silver paths through pastures grazed by sheep, their wool flecked with pollen from alpine asters that carpet the ground in violet seas. The air around them is meadow sweet, laced with the tang of sheep dung and the crisp bite of mountain air that sweeps down from snowfields crowning the ridges. Sunlight rakes the towers at morn, casting elongated shadows that march across the grass like time's slow tread, illuminating lichens that scale the mortarless stones in scales of ochre and slate. Afternoon winds sculpt the surrounding landscape, bending grasses into waves that break against boulder-strewn rises, where marmots whistle from burrows honeycombed in the earth. Twilight drapes the towers in indigo, their forms stark against the alpenglow that paints the peaks in fire, stars emerging to wheel above the silent watch. Svan Tower's environs are intimate wilds, clover-filled dells where butterflies cluster on thistles, and hidden springs that bubble from the tower bases, pooling into basins ringed by sedge that whispers in the evening calm. Standing at their foot, one traces the pattern of weather on the stone, inhales the earth's exhaled breath, where architecture and nature merge in stoic, scenic harmony. Martvili Canyon, emerald veins of the Abasha. In Somigrello's heart, Martvili Canyon unfurls as a verdant chasm where the Abasha River has sculpted limestone into fluted walls that soar 20 meters, draped in curtains of ivy and wild vine that cascade like living tapestries to the turquoise depths below. Sunlight filters through the canopy overhead, dappling the water in mosaics of light that dance on submerged ledges, where schools of minnows dart like quicksilver arrows amid the aquatic ballet. The air is lush and river-chilled, saturated with the verdant exhalation of beech forests that flank the rims, their leaves a rustling roof pierced by the calls of hoopoes echoing from the cliffs. Morning mist clings to the gorge, parting to reveal waterfalls that plume from clefts, their spray birthing rainbows that arc over boaters gliding through the narrow straits. Midday exposes the canyon's textural poetry, mossy overhangs where ferns unfurl like green scrolls, and shallow pools ringed by maidenhair that quivers in the current's kiss. Dusk hushes the flow to a glassy stillness, the walls glowing phosphorescent as fireflies ignite the gloaming, the river a dark mirror reflecting the starry vault. Martvili's wonders include side grottos where calcite drips form stalactites like frozen tears, and upstream rapids that foam over travertine steps, nourishing beds of watercress that thrive in the mineral flow. Paddling its length, one brushes hanging boughs, feels the cool spray on face, immersed in this liquid emerald where waters carve crafts a cathedral of stone and leaf. Szigeti Trinity Church, perch above the Kazbekian voids. At 2,170 meters below Mount Kazbek, Szigeti Trinity Church perches on a grassy knoll amid subalpine pastures that sweep upward to the glacier's lip, where wild rhubarb thrusts broad leaves like platters of green jade against the encroaching snow. The Trousseau Valley below is a rift of stark beauty, basaltic pillars marching like petrified forest across the floor, veined by hot springs that steam in sulphurous wisps amid meadows of edelweiss nodding in the wind. The air is heady with altitude, tasting of stone and wild thyme, gales from the peak whipping across the plateau to stir dust devils that spiral around the church's stone walls. Dawn floods the site with solar fire, the pastures igniting in dew-sparkled gold as ibex scale the nearby scarps, horns curling against the rosy ice fields. Midday thermals lift vultures in solemn circles, their shadows tracing paths over wildflower drifts of potentilla and saxifrage that cling to the turf. Twilight veils the void in purple mist, the church a lone silhouette against the mountain's glowing crown, the valley exhaling the day's heat in a chorus of crickets from the lower slopes. Szigeti surrounds harbor alpine tarns where meltwater pools insert basins, their surfaces unbroken save by the occasional ripple from a thirsty chamois, and ridges that offer vistas into the Divdaraki Gorge, its depths a chasm of fog and fern. Ascending to this perch, one treads the springy give of montane grass, inhales the crisp bite of glacier wind, standing in reverence where faith and fjord like wilds converge in transcendent isolation. Bagrati Cathedral, overlooks of the Imeretian Greens. From Bagrati's elevated site in Imereti, the landscape rolls into the Colchian lowlands, a sea of oak and hornbeam forest that undulates in shades of deep green, broken by meadows where wild garlic carpets the ground in spring's white tide. The Rioni River threads through distant vales, its floodplains a fertile crescent fringed by all the swamps that harbor storks nesting in the crotches of dead elms, their bills clacking like castanets in the humid air. Breezes from the Meskheti carry the scent of damp leaf mold and blooming chestnut, heavy and sweet, mingling with the faint, peaty whisper of boggy hollows hidden in the folds. Morning light sifts through the canopy, gilding the forest floor with patterns of sun and shade, awakening fungi that push through the duff in toadstool clusters of umber and cream. Afternoon heat steams the lowlands, mirages quivering over the river as butterflies, swallowtails in lemon and black, flutter from nectar to nectar amid the clover. Dusk cools the greens to jade, the river a silver snake winding toward the sea, fireflies pulsing in the understory like earth stars winking farewell. Bagrati's green expanse includes karst sinkholes ringed by wild strawberry, their depths lush with moss and the trickle of aquifers, and hillocks crowned by wild pear whose blossoms snow the paths in petal drifts. Gazing from this vantage, one feels the forest as breath on skin, hears the rustle of unseen life, enveloped in Imereti's verdant, voluptuous embrace. Chronicles of Georgia, vistas of the Kura's meanders. Perched on a hill above the Kura near Chronicles of Georgia, the river's great bend reveals a labyrinth of oxbows and cut-offs, where waters loop through poplar galleries that arch like green tunnels, their leaves a shimmer in the current's perpetual motion. Flood terraces step down to the water, carpeted in wild vetch and loose strife that blooms in purple spikes, attracting bees whose hum underscores the river's low roar over gravel bars. The air is riparian and rich, laced with the fresh snap of cut grass and the subtle rot of submerged logs that nurture caddisflies dancing in swarms at dusk. Dawn parts the overnight fog, the Kura awakening in ripples of light as ospreys plunge from perches, talons extended in predatory arcs. Midday sun turns the meanders to a blinding filigree, heat waves distorting the distant bluffs where basalt layers expose like the strata of time's ledger. Twilight hushes the flow, reflections stretching the poplars to twice their height in the glassy calm, as owls hoot from the gallery's eaves. The Kura's bends harbor side channels where willows form impenetrable thickets, and gravel islands colonized by bindweed that trails flowers into the shallows like floral lures. From the hill's crown, one surveys this aqueous arabesque, inhaling the water's exhaled mist, a chronicle written in wave and willow. Queen Tamari Castle, ramparts over Somske's gorges. Queen Tamari Castle overlooks the Godadsi Pass in Somske, where gorges of the Ajarist plunge deep into spruce-clad abysses, their walls sheared basalt veined by waterfalls that plume silver from mossy ledges high above the river's foam. Conifer forests cloak the slopes in eternal green, their boughs heavy with lichen festoons that sway like grey beards in the mountain gusts, releasing the sharp, balsamic perfume that defines the air's crisp edge. Trails snake along the rims, edged by bilberry thickets that stain the fingers purple in summer's yield, while below, the river carves rapids that thunder through narrows, spray birthing perpetual rainbows in the canyon's throat. Morning sun pierces the pass, gilding the waterfalls to liquid diamond, and awakening the understory to a chorus of thrush and finch. Afternoon clouds gather in the gorge, shadows pooling like ink in the depths as chamois scale the sheer faces with impossible poise. Dusk drapes the scene in amethyst, the river's roar softening to a bass undertone under the emerging moon that silvers the spruce. Somske's gorges hide grottos where calcite sparkles in torchlight, and alpine meadows atop the rims blooming with gentian bells that ring silent chimes in the wind. From the castle's ramparts, one leans into the void, feels the updraft lift hair, immersed in the gorge's visceral, vertical poetry. Borjomi, mineral veins of the Bakuriani Plateau. Borjomi's valley cradles the namesake springs in a basin of pine and birch, where the river bubbles over travertine terraces stained rainbow by mineral deposits, its waters steaming faintly in the chill mountain air laced with the tart fizz of carbonation. Forests of fir ascend the slopes in dark waves, their understory a mosaic of fern and sorrel that crunches underfoot, releasing earthy volatiles that mingle with the spring's sulphurous whisper. Paths wind through gnarled orchards of wild medlar, fruit heavy on boughs that arch over glades where deer browse at dawn's edge. Sunlight filters through the pines, dappling the riverbanks with gold motes as trout rise to sip the surface, rings expanding like breaths on glass. Midday heat tempers in the valley's cool, breezes stirring the birch leaves to silver undersides flashing like schools of fish. Twilight cools to mist, the springs glowing under lantern light as the forest exhales in cricket symphonies. Borjomi's plateau harbors bogs where cotton grass waves like snowy banners, and ridges offering vistas of the lesser Caucasus folding into haze. Sipping the effervescent flow, one feels the earth's inner fire on tongue, a valley where healing waters weave through woodland wonder. Gemismta village, highland meadows of the Achara. In Achara's high Gemismta, meadows of fescue and clover unfurl across plateaus at 2,000 meters, encircled by spruce that marches upward to timberline, their trunks etched by wind into twisted sculptures against the sky. Streams from the peaks thread the grass in silver rills, pooling into tarns ringed by sedge that quivers in the gusts carrying the clean scent of ozone and alpine bloom. Wild horses graze the sward, manes flowing like banners in the breeze, while marmots whistle from boulder piles that dot the flat like nature's dice. Dawn gilds the meadows to topaz, dew jewels catching the light as larks spiral skyward in song spirals. Afternoon clouds shadow the expanse, rain showers greening the turf to vivid emerald as rainbows arc over the distant sea. Dusk hushes the wind, stars wheeling above the unlighted plain, the meadows exhaling warmth in firefly flickers. M's highs include glacial cirques where snow lingers in blue pockets, and passes to subalpine scrub alive with time's purple haze. Wandering the plateau, one sinks into the grass's give, inhales the peak's pure breath, a highland idyll of boundless, breezy beauty. Kazbek Fortress, gorges of the Ksia's fury. Kazbek Fortress guards a gorge where the Ksia River roars through volcanic tuff, its canyon walls fluted by erosion into organ pipes of red and black, draped in wild vine that blooms trumpet flowers in defiant scarlet. The river foams over boulders in perpetual rage, spray nourishing hanging gardens of fern and orchid that cascade from clefts like green veils. Air in the gorge is damp and mineral, the thunder of water underscoring the rustle of leaves in the flanking oak woods. Sun pierces the narrows at noon, turning mist to prism light as swallows swoop through the spray. Shadow lengthens the roar to echo, the walls glowing in reflected gold at eve. Kazbek's depths hide side canyons with travertine pools, and rims of wild rose thicket. From the fortress, the gorge's power pulses, a cosmic symphony of stone and stream. Bishumi, pine-clad slopes of the Meskheti. Bishumi's Meskheti slopes are swathed in pine that climbs to 2,200 meters, their needles a carpet underfoot releasing resinous perfume in the sun-warmed air laced with wild berries tartness. Meadows intervene in sunny clearings, blooming daisy and vetch in white and purple drifts, grazed by goats whose bells tinkle faintly. Streams from the heights bubble through the duff, forming pools where frogs croak in bass harmony. Light slants through the pines, patterning the ground with sunspots dancing on pinecone litter. Clouds shadow the slopes, rain pattering on needles like soft drum. Moon silvers the boughs, owls calling from the dark. Bishumi's woods harbor glades of blueberry, and ridges to alpine scrub. Breathing the pines' sigh, one finds solace in the slopes, shaded serenity. Bridge of Peace arcs over the Kura's urban flow. Though urban, the Bridge of Peace spans the Kura where it flows through Tbilisi's green corridors, waters rippling past willow-fringed banks alive with the dart of cormorants diving for minnows in the current. The river's bend here cradles reed beds where herons stalk, and opposite shores rise to bluffs of wild acacia blooming yellow in spring's heat. Air along the banks carries river coolness and park pollen, breezes stirring leaves to silver flash. Dawn gilds the flow, mist rising as fish break surface in rings. Sun arcs the bridge, reflections dancing below. Dusk deepens the Kura to navy, lights mirroring on wave. The flow's wildness persists in eddying backwaters of lily and frog. Crossing, one feels the river's pulse, a peaceful link to the land's liquid heart. Adishi, Valley of the Svan glacial birth. Adishi Valley in Svaneti channels from the Adishi Glacier, a tongue of ice that calves into a lake of melt, its shores moraine fringed with dwarf willow quaking in the wind's keen edge. Pastures below bloom hardy aster amid the rubble, sheep grazing where grass thrusts green from gravel. Air bites with ice and earth, streams from the snout foaming over slabs in white veils. Sun melts the face, rills tracing blue paths down the ice. Shadows pool in crevasses, the lake still as glass. Stars reflect in the tarn, silence profound. Adishi's wilds include side valleys of rhododendron thicket. Tracing the valley, the glacier's breath chills, a birth of water from frozen womb. Gudorai, ski slopes of the Kazbekian flanks. Gudorai clings to Kazbek's western flanks, where slopes of packed snow sweep down from 3,000 meters, pines at lower edges dusted white in winter's mantle, their boughs heavy with hoarfrost crystals that sparkle like diamonds in the sun. Meadows in summer green the runs, edelweiss nodding amid the lift lines, air crisp with pine and snow melts fresh. Winds sculpt drifts into waves, powder flying like fairy dust. Dawn pinkens the peaks, lifts whirring to life. Afternoon sun softens the crust, slush pooling in runs. Twilight blues the snow, lights tracing the fall lines. Gudorai's heights harbor backcountry bowls of corniced rim. Descending, wind whips face, a rush of mountains white wild. Zinvali Reservoir, sapphire heart of the Aragvi. Zinvali Reservoir pools the Aragvi in a basin ringed by conifer hills, waters deep, blue reflecting spruce that marches to the shore, their reflections doubling the green in mirror perfection. Inlets fjord-like hide coves of pebble beach, reed-fringed where coots dive in black and white. Air lake cool, scented by fir and water's mineral kiss. Mist mornings veil the surface, parting to sun sparkle. Wind ruffles afternoon waves, boats trailing wakes like silver threads.